everyone, if you're new here, hello, I'm Estonia, and today I'm jumping into the first 2 hours of 15 cozy games to see which ones are actually worth your time and which ones maybe aren't. I'll be reviewing each one and talking about what I loved, what felt a little bit off, and which ones I will definitely continue to play after this video releases. So the way that this video works is I'm going to play the first 2 hours of each game, and the moment my timer is up, I'm putting the game down and writing the review. So if I'm talking about a game, just remember it's only about my experience with the first couple of hours unless I state otherwise. But before that, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe because I have videos just like this one coming out soon. Anyway, grab your snacks, get cozy, and let's get into it. I wasn't sure what to expect when I went into playing Palia, but this one actually really pleasantly surprised me. The first thing I noticed is the character customizer. It's not super in-depth in the sense that you can't move individual facial features around, but one thing that got me way too excited was when I realized you can have half and half hair. Because I always have to choose between black and orange for games, and this let me have my actual hair color, even if the haircut is literally called goth cut, which honestly feels like a personal attack. They've clearly nailed their target audience too, because even the outfits are just like very cute. I spent a lot of time trying to decide between wearing a dress or a hoodie and shorts because both of them were just perfect in my eyes. When I actually started playing though, one of the first things I noticed was how good the music is. The game has this Disney/DreamWorks kind of vibe, and the soundtrack really amplifies that feeling. Early on, I was tasked with cleaning up the area around my house, which introduces you to crafting. Use gathered resources to make furniture and other items for your home, and one of the characters, Hadari, hints that you can unlock more recipes by meeting other people. I can already tell that later in this game you'll be able to really design your space exactly how you want it. When placing items, you're not just locked into a grid either, which I love. You can actually just go wild and place anything anywhere you want. And later on, this was actually confirmed to me when I did the Tour Home quest. This shows you around other people's houses. The first one I saw was a set build by the NPC Tish, but it genuinely opened my mind to how creative you can get with the home design in this game. I also think from a game design perspective, it's a really smart side quest idea because it makes you want to sink time into decorating and improving your own space to look like these other ones. I spent some time browsing actual player submissions afterwards, and wow, some people have put a lot of time into making some really cool stuff in this game. During this, I stumbled across the accomplishments tab, and it is absolutely stacked with things to work towards. Stuff like collecting certain bugs, catching your first rare fish, earning 10,000 gold, or reaching cooking level 10. If you're someone who likes having goals and checklists and things to work towards in cozy games, this tab is going to be your best friend. Whilst in this journal, I also found a relationship tab where you can see your friendship level with each NPC, which is really cool for an MMO. You can give them gifts daily and see if they're looking for anything specific, and when you reach a certain friendship level with them, you unlock rewards like decorations for your home. It also straight up tells you that after reaching level 3, friendship unlocks romance for certain characters. So yes, you can date people in this MMO if you want. Speaking of the NPCs, the character designs across the board are really well done, and you can tell so much about each person from just how they look and stand. Orny smiling with his little gappy teeth genuinely brings me so much joy. Not everything is fully voice acted, but the characters will say little lines when you start talking with them or when you walk away, and the voice acting that is there is genuinely top tier. It adds so much personality, and every voice fits the character perfectly and is just exactly how I would have expected them to sound based off their looks alone. Genuinely, it would not hit the same if it was all just text.
I need to focus on more important things.
I'll also say this, I don't think the writing is bad at all. Maybe that's because I went in with low expectations, but I actually really enjoyed it. It made me want to talk to the NPCs rather than avoid them, and sure, some of the characters are a bit cliche for the genre, but the writing is fun and everyone has a clear personality. It makes it really easy to have favorites, and it has me fully invested in figuring out who I want to romance, even though the devs are absolute cowards because they won't let me date Ashura. I also really love that there's robots in the game. Even though the setting is more medieval, village village fantasy, they still fit in perfectly and don't feel out of place, which really adds character to the game as a whole. Also, I am pretty much #1 Einar fan, so that also helps too. The game does its own spin on a lot of the typical cozy game stuff, for example the bug catching system. It's not just have a net and catch the bug, instead you throw smoke bombs at them and there's a percentage chance that they escape. The rarer the bug, the higher the chance. If they don't escape though, they drop to the ground and you can collect them. I already felt the addiction of wanting to get them all during my first 2 hours, but also that little bit of excitement when the random dice roll does go in my favour. Overall, Palia is basically everything you would expect from a cozy game like Animal Crossing, but turned into an MMO, and it actually works surprisingly well. The tutorial does a great job of letting you meet the villagers, whilst also teaching you all of the core systems like farming, hunting, fishing, bug catching, and cooking, without it feeling like too much information all at once. There are also a bunch of really nice quality of life features, like on the map you can see where all of the NPCs are at any time, there's a fast travel button to get home quickly, and when selling items you can sell them directly from your storage instead of what's just in your inventory. And as expected with an MMO, there are things like dailies and weeklies, so there's always something to do if you just want to log in every day and chill for a bit. Overall, my first 2 hours with Palia were genuinely really fun, and it feels like a cozy game that actually understands what people like about the genre, just on a much bigger multiplayer scale. The first thing that hit me with Ritual of Raven is that the art style is just genuinely stunning. I love how vibrant everything is. It feels like most games tend to go for a more realistic colour palette as of late, but because this game is set in a more magical world, they've really leaned into the colours and it's just really pretty because of that. Also, the animations are just so well done. There's clearly a lot of thought behind the design of everything, from the house to the journal, and I also love how goofy my character looks, both in their character design and in the conversation portraits. It's just all very Cartoon Network coded. You can change your look whenever you want, and even though the character customization is pretty minimal, it's really nice that there's no punishment for wanting to switch up your outfit. The farming mechanic is really unique and honestly one of the most interesting parts of the game during my first 2 hours. You can't farm yourself because the objects lose their magic if you touch them with your hands, so instead you have to get constructs to do the farming for you. You basically place cards into them that tell them what to do, and the game describes it as being a bit like programming, which it is, but in a very simple, accessible way. It really reminds me of those little robot toys that you used to get in school where you would like tell it to move forward 5 steps, then turn 90 degrees, then move forward 3 steps, you know the ones. In the tutorial, I used the cards to tell a construct to move around and harvest some lavender. Right now that is very simple, but I can already imagine how much automation you'll be able to do later when you can expand the cards you get. When you're planning out the cards, there's also a button that lets you preview exactly what the construct is going to do before you execute it, which is really nice. You're not just hoping you've done it right, you can actually see if it works before hitting go. This construct card system isn't just used for farming either. During my playthrough, I came across a blocked bridge that was leading to the village, and the way to get past it was by moving a construct, so I hit all of the pressure plates on the floor. It was a fairly easy puzzle, but still satisfying, and the game continues doing these little puzzles throughout, usually rewarding you with a new card for completing them. As the game continues, you start picking up more cards that make the tasks more easier. For example, I got a sign that covers a 3x3 area of land, so if I tell my construct to harvest at the sign, it'll harvest everything in that area. There's also a really fun plant mechanic where you don't actually have to wait for the crops to fully grow before harvesting them. You can harvest plants at different stages in order to get different ingredients. For example, you can harvest pansies on day 1 to get their leaves, or wait until day 3 where they're fully grown to get their flowers, which I really like. Another thing to mention is the sleeping mechanic. If you don't get into bed by 2 AM, the game just magically tucks you in bed and ends the day. For a cozy game, this could be a good choice because it means you don't have to stress about rushing home or managing strict time constraints. But in practice, I don't necessarily know if this is amazing because on my first day, I actually stayed up on purpose to test this. I just got a warning at midnight saying it was getting late, but at 2 AM the day just ended and I didn't get any lost items or penalties for doing that. So honestly, if I was to play more of this game, I think I would rarely end a day early. I understand that this game wants to have the day-night cycle and there is a certain point where it has to switch over to the next day, but there is a game later on in this list that does that way better. The currency in this game isn't money, it's shards, and you earn these by heading to portals around the world and throwing anything you want into them. You can spend shards on seeds, new cards, and furniture, and yes, I absolutely want decoration and furniture in my cozy farming game. The villagers sell all of this to you, and walking around the village and meeting meeting everyone was honestly one of my favourite parts of this game. Everyone has their own cute design, and even though there aren't loads of villagers at the start, I still found it fairly enjoyable to do all of their little side quests. And without spoiling too much, you will get more people coming to this village to chat with and even level up friendship with later on. One thing I really appreciated about this game is how it handles dialogue. You'll hear me talk about unnecessary dialogue later on, but Ritual of Raven feels like how you do a dialogue narrative focused game without it becoming too heavy or distracting on the gameplay itself. For context, there is a lot of explaining in this game, talking with people to learn more about them and the world around you, and although it's not like the most complex, gripping story ever to be made, it's just enough dialogue that I don't find myself skipping through it, at least in the first 2 hours. Speaking of, by the end of my first 2 hours, I'd completed a decent variety of side quests and made some progress in the main story, but I don't think it was enough to keep me invested in it and want to keep playing. I think if you enjoy slower paced games and are maybe a little bit younger or like cute aesthetics with inclusive stories, then I'd honestly recommend giving this game a try. It's the absolute all-rounder of the cozy game genre. Fields of Mistria is another farming sim, but one that stands out, and honestly, for good reason. At the start of writing, this game is still in early access with a full 1.0 release planned for 2026, but you would not even know it. The game is completely polished, and boy, the art direction for this game is just chef's kiss. It draws so heavily from 90s anime and old school pixel art, giving it a style that's both nostalgic but feels so distinctly Fields of Mistria. There are so many little quality of life touches that set a new standard for farming sims in this game. You can save at any time you want, and the minimap shows exactly where all the NPCs are. You can jump, and crafting lets you use items from your storage, not just your backpack. These might sound like small things, but they really add up and make the whole experience feel so much smoother. Even the NPCs surprise me in this game. Usually I know right away who I want to romance, but here I found myself spending serious time considering each one because the characters really have distinct personalities. Sure, there are still some cliches like the guy who's mean to you at first, but the dialogue and the interactions make the town feel really alive. Every day you see townsfolk going about their routines, chatting with each other, and sometimes they'll include you in the conversation. They even reference things that you've done recently like donations to the museum or unlocked areas, and every Friday they meet at the pub for a games night. These little touches make the village feel a lot more alive, like you're actually joining in as part of their community. You're learning what they do and how things work around here. For example, the Saturday market. Every Saturday, the vendors will get together and sell specific items, or the villagers will be at the market too, so it's great for swooping in and getting your daily chat to everyone and finding people to give them their gifts. For a small team, this game is incredibly impressive. It's clear the developers are fans of the cozy farming sim genre, as it has pretty much everything you could ever want. If you love this type of game, you'll want to grab it immediately. Fair warning though, it's the kind of game that slowly becomes your favourite in the genre, so make sure you wrap up any other games first, or you might never come back to them. This review is a little bit shorter than the others, but don't let that fool you. It's literally because I have nothing negative to say about the game. It isn't groundbreaking, but it's absolutely one of the best cozy farming sims out there thanks to its art, quality of life features, attention to characters, and the game mechanics. While we're here, if you're enjoying this video, it'd mean a lot if you gave it a like and considered subscribing. I've put a lot of effort into this one, and your support really helps me keep making more videos like it. Also, I'd love to hear what you'd like to see next. I'm thinking maybe 15 puzzle games, but anyway, let's get back to the video. So, when it comes to Little Witch in the Woods, before I start, I want to stress once again, this is just based on the first 2 hours of the game. So, if it does get better later on, definitely let me know down below. First of all, I want to start with the positives in this one because there are absolutely positives in it. The game is gorgeous. Honestly, the artist is carrying this game. It's pixel art, but with such a distinct style that you couldn't confuse it with any other pixel art game. The character designs, the animations, the conversation portraits, they're all just stunning. The game leans really hard into this cozy cottagecore vibe because it's not just about stressing over crop schedules or remembering birthdays or figuring out which villager likes what. It really wants you to relax, and it does a great job of that, as long as you don't mind being interrupted by lengthy dialogue. Also, during my first 2 hours, I didn't encounter any combat, and I'm not sure if that comes later, but it definitely adds to the overall cozy vibe. Unfortunately, that is really all I enjoyed about Little Witch in the Woods, as there's just one thing that got in my way of enjoying it more. There is a lot of text in this game, and I mean a lot. With most cozy games, you usually get a bit of setup, opening cutscene, a tutorial where you get to grips with the mechanics, and then you're pretty much dropped into the actual gameplay. But this game takes its time. I just want to note here that this is a personal preference, and me not liking this game doesn't mean that other people won't enjoy it, but my first 2 hours was pretty much all setup and no gameplay. To give you the full context of how slow this game is, if you're deciding whether or not you would enjoy it though, by 1 hour in, this is basically what I'd done. I was on a train heading to a school, and the game made me ask around the carriages whether I have to take my shoes off when I get to the stop, or if I've just been had by a prank. This doesn't really go anywhere, it just takes about 10 minutes of listening to your heart, the bartender, and this random guy talk about it. The train breaks down, so my character gets off to look at a tree. On the way back to the train, we get distracted by a cat and have to follow it. We find a witch's house and we sleep the night in it. I run back to catch the train and it's gone, so I decide to check out the village. The village is blocked by vines, so I have to go back to the witch's house to make a potion, but not before the game makes me clean the weeds outside, inside, and in the basement of the house. Once I make the potion, I clear the path of the weeds to finally get to the village, only to find another set of thicker weeds blocking me again, all while being repeatedly stopped so my character and a hat can yap about things that doesn't really add anything to the game, develop them as characters, or the world itself. It's just talking. For example, I'll clean the cobwebs off a shelf and they're talking about what type of shelf it is. It doesn't really add anything important, but it's almost like anytime you do something, like if you enter somewhere new, the devs wanted the characters to have an interaction that goes on a little bit too long talking about it, regardless if it was needed or not. Overall, the gameplay just feels very slow. The tutorials themselves aren't bad, but the dialogue really is, and for a game that relies heavily on dialogue, it ends up being a bit of a letdown. I don't usually mind reading in games, but even 2 hours in, I find myself skipping dialogue because it felt tedious, and actively dreading talking to NPCs because I didn't know how long it was going to go on for. If you're looking for a cozy RPG visual novel, then this game is that. I just think me and probably a lot of other people based on the trailer went in expecting something with a bit more gameplay, and it really isn't that. I want to clarify, it isn't the game's fault I went in with this expectation, but the tags for the game don't really lead me to believe it was more of a visual novel with gameplay elements, and neither does the trailer. Again, this is only the first 2 hours, so it might open up a little bit more later on. I just don't think personally I would get through the beginning bit anytime soon to figure that out though. I don't necessarily mind a narrative exploration game, but even on that front it feels like it misses the mark. With writing that often feels off and just hard to get through, if you're after a cozy narrative game, I would honestly rather recommend something like Night in the Woods or Spiritfarer instead of this. Tiny Bookshop is just a really chill pastime game where you run a tiny travelling bookstore and sell books to the locals of a village. As you sell more books, you'll unlock new locations to travel to, meet regulars who come back over time, progress their stories, help them with tasks, and eventually work your way towards owning a bookstore of your own. It's really simple and just easy to sink into. The standout mechanic for me is definitely the recommendation system. Randomly throughout the day, people will come into your shop asking for a book recommendation, which opens up a little minigame. They'll describe the kind of book they're looking for, and you have to dig through your stock and pick something you think they'll like. Most of the books in the game are real-life books, which makes this mechanic feel extra fun. There's something really exciting about recommending Jujutsu Kaisen to someone who wants manga, or handing the Harry Potter books to someone who wants dog shit writing. That said, I do need to caveat this system a little bit because sometimes it just does not work as intended, and that can be frustrating. For example, I've had someone ask for a classic book with poetry and drama, and when I recommended Henry V by William Shakespeare, they rejected it. Other times, someone might ask for something historical, and when you recommend them a book from the 1800s, they say it's not historical enough because the plot itself isn't historical. I've seen a lot of people online mention similar issues, so it's definitely not just me. Thankfully, it doesn't happen often enough to completely ruin the experience. The game is still very enjoyable overall, but it can feel a little unfair when it does happen. That being said, the developers seem fairly active. As of recording, a big update was released towards the end of December 2025, and this was after I'd already played the game for this video. This update added over 1,000 new books to discover, the ability to save and load Bookshop presets, and, most importantly, adjusted the tags for certain books, which hopefully fixes the recommendation issues I mentioned earlier. I haven't personally played since since that update, but if you have, I'd genuinely love to know how it feels now, because it seems it adds some amazing quality of life bits to the game that was really needed. Now, for full transparency, I have actually 100% completed Tiny Bookshop for a future video I'm working on. However, I am reviewing it here based specifically on my first 2 hours, because honestly, 100%ing the game had a bit of a negative impact on my overall perception of it. It became very grindy, a lot of the achievements are essentially the same task repeated across different genres. There's things like sell 40 crime books in a day, sell 40 fantasy books in a day, sell 40 kids books in a day, and by the end of it, it definitely started to feel a bit like a slog. I just wanted to mention this though, because even outside of my achievement hunting, I do think the gameplay loop can become fairly repetitive over time. Only about 17% of players have the achievements for spending 1 year in Buxtonbury, which kind of suggests that a lot of people didn't stick with this game for that long. I did a bit of research and found that this game is also available on the Switch, and even though I personally played it on the PC, I honestly think this is the perfect on the sofa, in bed, traveling kind of game. It feels much better suited to being played in sort of chill sessions rather than grinding it for hours at a time like I did. Overall, during my first couple of hours though, Tiny Bookshop is genuinely enjoyable and doing something I haven't seen before. If you especially like the idea of a low stakes game and like what you see here, you'll enjoy it, I have no doubt. It's not a game I would personally binge all day again, but as a gentle, nightly wind down game, it is amazing. Okay, so this next one really shocked me. Make Room is a little game where you can just build rooms, that's it. You're given a bunch of objects and complete freedom to design spaces however you want, and it ends up being a really fun, creative game. I also really want to take a second here to shout out the dev, Kenny, because they are genuinely the GOAT when it comes to free game assets. If you've ever followed a game development tutorial online, chances are you've used Kenny's assets without even realizing it. Honestly, buying this game just to support them is a great idea, and I've linked their page down below where you can find their assets and donate to them if you want to. They're also super active with the Make Room community, replying to people on Twitter and Steam, and frequently releasing quality of life updates and bug fixes from listening to the community. So it really feels like a game that's only going to get better with time. The first thing I noticed on the main menu was the daily prompt feature, which I absolutely love. Every day the game picks 3 random words from a pool of them and gives you a theme to build around that's shared by everyone who's playing that day. On the first day I recorded this, the prompt was Pink Cozy Kitchen, so I decided to use that as my first build since it's not something I'd normally go for. I really love this idea, especially if you want to chat with friends about what you made, or look up online and see what other people came up with. As someone who does graphic design outside of YouTube, I find it really easy to get stuck in making the same kind of stuff just because it's what I like. Which isn't a bad thing, but having a daily challenge that pushes you into unfamiliar styles can actually be really refreshing. In this case, I could have gone all in on pink, but I didn't want it to feel too overwhelming, and that challenge alone helped teach me restraint and balance. I also love that you can look up other people's builds for the same prompt. People post their screenshots on the Steam community page, and it's genuinely really cool to see how differently everyone interprets the same 3 words. I got a few examples on screen now from other people's takes, and they're also different from mine. Another thing I think this game could be really useful for, if it's something you relate to, is creating reference images for drawings or comics. I sometimes struggle with perspective, and this would be perfect to quickly build a room, angle the camera exactly how you want it, take a screenshot, and now you've got a personalized reference image that's exactly what you need. What I really love about Make Room is it gives me that same feeling I used to get playing The Sims, where I'd use the motherload cheat, I'd make myself a millionaire, and I'd just build houses and decorate rooms for hours. This feels like a distilled version of that, and I ended up way more addicted than I expected. I usually gravitate towards cozy games that are heavier on the gameplay or trying something new, so honestly I went into this thinking it wouldn't really be for me. 2 hours later, I realized how fast the time had flown by, and I could absolutely see myself sinking an entire night into this just to finish one more room and look up and see the sun is rising. I will say, if you're someone who wants more traditional gameplay, this game is very much what you make of it. If you set your own challenges like only using one colour, or I'm gonna try and recreate this specific kind of room I've seen before, then you're probably gonna love it. It feels a lot more like doing a daily doodle just in game form, another really nice outlet for your creativity. Overall, Make Room completely surprised me. It's really simple and way more absorbing than it has any right to be, especially if you enjoy creating just for the sake of creating. With Here Comes Niko, one of the first things I noticed is that the controls are a little weird. I was playing on mouse and keyboard, so I don't know if that's part of the issue, but there were multiple moments early on when I was genuinely confused about what the game wanted from me. Right at the start of this game, a frog finishes speaking and I wanted him to say his next line. So naturally, I tried clicking, pressing space, and a bunch of other keys, and nothing happened. After mashing basically everything on my mouse and keyboard, I eventually realized that pressing Q was what progressed dialogue. This just feels like a bit of an odd choice because most people are instinctively going to try clicking or pressing space like I did, and I just think design-wise it would have been beneficial to add a little thing on the screen that says Q next to the dialogue, just to make it a little bit more intuitive. There's also another moment in the game where your mum calls you, and I was prompted to press 1 or 2 to either keep or delete the message. I pressed 2 on my keyboard to delete it, and it didn't work. I then tried moving my mouse to click it, but there isn't a cursor on screen, so the next thing I tried was using the arrow keys to move down to option 2. That also did nothing. What finally worked was I pressed S and then Q, which selected the option. Again, I know this sounds a little bit over the top, but it took a little while to get used to because it's just not intuitive. None of it is explained very clearly, and it feels like the game is fighting against the muscle memory most players already have. Gameplay-wise, things can also feel a little bit repetitive. Each area introduces new tasks, which is nice, but you also keep running into the same reoccurring characters who ask for the very same thing over and over again. For example, there is this influencer bear who wants me to collect 30 bugs, there's a cat who wants me to plant plots of flowers, and a fisher who wants me to catch fish. And these people and the exact same requests pop up in every new zone. It's not awful, but after a while, it does start feeling like you're ticking off the same checklist repeatedly, rather than discovering new interactions. There was also one area where I had to collect bones, and the whole place was just full of invisible walls. I don't know if it was intentional to add difficulty or just an awkward design choice, but it made maneuvering around the area just so frustrating. The fact that I'm unsure whether it's on purpose kind of says a lot about the game though. If it was intentional, it doesn't really feel good to play, and if it wasn't, then it just really needs some polish. That being said, there are some really nice quality of life touches that I appreciated. When you finish a task, for example, collecting the 30 butterflies, the character who gave you that quest pops up at the bottom of the screen to remind you to come back and collect your reward. That's especially helpful because with how many small tasks you're juggling, it's easy to forget who asked for what. It's just a really thoughtful reminder of, hey, you finished this thing. Also, really like that there's a board at the start of each area that tells you whether you're missing any collectibles. That alone makes exploration feel way less stressful because you're not constantly wondering if you missed something important before moving on. None of these issues make it a bad game by any means. There's clearly charm here and a lot of effort put in by the devs, and a lot of small details that show care went into the design. Whilst on the design though, I just want to say I think the characters are really cute and each level is so different from the last, and overall design and art for the game is super distinct. However, at the full price, the game is asking for £20.99, and for that exact same price you can buy something like Tinykin. When you start comparing it to other games in that price range, the awkward controls, the repetition, the frustration that comes with that, it becomes a little harder to ignore. Overall, it's not a bad experience, but it does feel like one that really needed either a bit more polish or slightly lower price point to fully justify itself. I bought it during Humble Bundle, and honestly, I'm really happy with what I got for the price that I paid for a lot of different games. Unpacking is a game where you do exactly that. You unpack boxes as you move into a new home. On the surface it sounds incredibly simple, and honestly it is. You take items out of boxes and place them around rooms. That is the entire mechanic. But what really makes this game special is the narrative that unfolds alongside the gameplay. The thing I love most about Unpacking is how it tells a story without ever explicitly telling you one. There's no dialogue, no cutscenes, no text explaining what's happening, yet you slowly piece together the life of this girl as she grows up and moves through different stages of her life. Through what she owns, what she keeps, and what disappears between moves, you start to understand her story. I genuinely found myself feeling emotional while unpacking, noticing objects that followed her from place to place. It's such a subtle way of storytelling, but it works incredibly well. I'm being a bit vague here on purpose because the game is quite short. It's around 3 hours in total, and during my 2-hour playthrough, I actually got pretty far into it. I really don't want to spoil any of the more emotional moments because those discoveries are where the game truly truly shines. If you like the look of what you're seeing on screen now, I would absolutely recommend picking it up and experiencing it for yourself. That being said, I'd maybe suggest grabbing it on sale if you're someone who values length or replayability, because once you've experienced the story, there isn't really a huge amount of incentive to replay it. You can replay Unpacking if you really want to, don't get me wrong, and I actually think some people do, especially if they just find the act of unpacking relaxing, but the real experience of the game comes from following the character's life as it unfolds. Once you already know her story, you can't really sit through that experience again and have the same emotional impact, and looking at Steam, it seems most people sit at around the 5 to 10 hour mark at most, with only a few exceptions going beyond that. Mechanically, there isn't much to criticize. The controls are intuitive, the pacing is calm, and the game never rushes you. I didn't encounter a single bug during my 2 hours, which honestly isn't something I can say for a lot of the cozy games on this list. The sound design is also really pleasant. Everything just works together to create a really calming atmosphere that encourages you to slow down and take your time. There's not a huge amount more to say here because the concept itself is so simple, and that's why this review is a little bit shorter than some of the others on this list, but do not take that as a negative. Unpacking is a really lovely play in one night kind of game, the sort of thing you curl up with and finish in a few hours. The only real downside is just that though, how short it is, but honestly what is there is done incredibly well. If you enjoyed cozy games that focus on more emotion and atmosphere than the mechanics or the challenge, and you like the idea of environmental storytelling, then Unpacking is absolutely worth your time. Another one of my favourites on this list now, Caravan Sandwitch. One of the first things I noticed about Caravan Sandwich is how much it genuinely rewards exploration. When I reached the first main village area, I immediately ignored the main task and just started wandering around, and I'm really glad that I did. I found little story notes tucked away, along with useful resources like a snack bar and a component. I love that the game does this because it really incentivizes you from the get-go to look around, and it never feels like exploring is a waste of time. The areas themselves are also designed so beautifully. From the very start, you can tell this town is mostly empty with boarded up doors and abandoned buildings everywhere, but what really makes it special are the small details that make it feel lived in. There's a chalk-drawn hopscotch area on the ground and 2 chairs set up with food and drinks beside them. Little scenes like this let you imagine what life is like for the people living here. You can picture kids playing and whilst their parents are sat nearby relaxing, and I absolutely love when games include little details like this because it makes the world feel real. Also, the game is honestly just so stunning that it makes you want to explore every corner. There are even little spots where you can sit down and just enjoy the view, which feels like such a perfect touch for an exploration game. Those quiet moments in between the quests are extremely welcomed and let you have a moment to look at how beautiful these environments are. Cozy-wise, there's also this really lovely sense of community. As you head back to the area where you grew up, you run into people who already know you, and seeing them get excited to see you again feels genuinely warm. I also really like how quests are handled in this game. Instead of a traditional to-do list, quests come in like text messages, which is just such a nice design choice and really unique. It doesn't pull you out of the game at all, and it genuinely feels like your character is checking their phone rather than managing a quest list. During my first 2 hours, the side quests didn't feel grindy, and there's no punishment for ignoring them either. It's completely up to you. That said, I found myself wanting to do them, mostly because I like the locals so much and I wanted to help them out. A big part of this game's charm is the sense of community and adventure it builds. For example, Rose's computer breaks whilst it's watering her tomatoes, so she asks you to head into some nearby ruins to find parts to fix it. The reward itself for this is just some components, but the sense of accomplishment felt really cute, and it gave me an excuse to explore more of the world. During that quest, I even had a fun interaction with a robot where I could have just stolen the part I needed, but instead chose to help him out in exchange for them. Little moments like this really added to the want to explore. Even though some of the quests sound like they could be fetch questy, each one feels just enough different that it never really got old during my time with the game. I genuinely feel like Caravan Sandwich is about the experience of doing things and seeing where they lead. To me, this kind of game is the perfect definition of a cozy game. It isn't lacking in the gameplay, there are still plenty of tasks and objectives, part of the game is doing something new I haven't seen before, but everything is done at your own pace. The interactions are wholesome without being over the top, and the writing feels really grounded and realistic too. There's also this mysterious spirit, for lack of a better word, that watches you from afar and follows you around the world, and honestly I'm really intrigued by it. Between that mystery and the unanswered questions of what happened to my sister, whether I can find her or if she's even still alive, the game gives you a lot of motivation to keep going. These questions don't just drive the character forward, they made me want to uncover the story too. If you enjoy narrative-driven adventure and exploration games, then I would strongly recommend Caravan Sandwich. If you've ever wanted a 3D version of Stardew Valley, then this is probably the closest thing to that. I try not to compare every cozy farming game to Stardew, especially when a game is clearly trying to do its own thing, because I think it's such an easy trap for reviewers to fall into. That being said, some games are really built on the same foundation, and Coral Island absolutely knows what it's doing. In terms of daily tasks, you've got all the classics: farming, mining, fishing, foraging, bug catching, the full cozy checklist. During my first couple of hours, the daily loop never really felt like a grind either. There's no constant pressure to min-max your day, so if you like taking things at your own pace, this game feels really comfortable to settle into, especially early on. Where Coral Island does try and differentiate itself from Stardew though is through its theme. You're living on an island, and one of the major story threads is cleaning up the ocean. Instead of an evil corporation trying to take over the local supermarkets, you've got an evil corporation actively polluting the sea. I also really appreciated some of the quality life features right from the start. Being able to see where all of the NPCs are on the map is huge, and the option to adjust the length of the day is such a good accessibility choice. If you want longer days so you can get more done before the seasons change, you can just do that, which feels great. One thing I'm a little bit torn on is the romance system. There are 28 dateable characters in the village, and while the character artists absolutely smashed it because I am unfortunately attracted to every single one of them, it does fall into the date everything trap a little bit. With that many romance options, some character stories end up feeling a bit shallow, and the idea that absolutely everyone in this town is single and ready to fall in love with you is a bit much. That said, my cozy gamer brain is also like, wow, so many options, so I'm just very much on the fence with this point. I do want to be transparent about something though. Coral Island is technically out of early access and is labeled as a 1.0 release, but the game is not complete. This didn't affect my first 2 hours at all. Those early stages are actually really enjoyable, but I've played this game a lot more outside of this video. I've gotten over 100 hours in it, which should give you a good idea of how much content there can be if this game clicks with you. However, later on things can become really frustrating when you run into unfinished areas, incomplete storylines, or shops you just can't even interact with yet. I wouldn't be as harsh about the game if it was still in early access, but it isn't, so I do think it's really important to mention. That said, I really want to give credit to the developers. Despite all of this, they're still updating the game frequently and pushing out meaningful improvements. Their publisher, Humble Games, actually went through major layoffs in 2024, which left the devs unable to release updates for a while and caused a lot of delays. Considering how devastating that situation was, it's genuinely impressive that the game is still standing, still improving, and still receiving large updates, especially from a relatively small indie team. Overall, Coral Island is just a really neat farming sim. It's pretty much everything you'd expect from the genre, just presented in 3D rather than pixel art, which in itself helps it stand out a little bit. I especially love the Southeast Asian influences throughout the game. A lot of the food, festivals, and visual motifs are inspired by Indonesian culture, and honestly, I kinda wish the game leaned even harder into that to make it feel even more distinct and unique. Once again, I hate mentioning Stardew Valley when talking about farming sims, but Coral Island really is just a carbon copy of it, just 3D. If you like Stardew Valley, you will probably like this game, and if you're wanting something just a little bit familiar but fresh, then Coral Island is a really solid option. I put this one after Coral Island because although at first glance it looks like just another farming sim, it is so much more than that. This is one of those pixel art cozy games that's actually doing something really unique. It puts gameplay first rather than relying purely on vibes and aesthetics, and pushes the genre a little bit further, and honestly it pays off so well. While there is some farming in Chef RPG, it is not the main focus at all. Your primary way of getting ingredients for the restaurant is actually through hunting and gathering. During the day you can head out into the world to forage, hunt local wildlife, and explore for ingredients. You can also buy these items from town stalls, but early game, when money is tight, hunting and gathering is absolutely the way to go. I found myself spending nothing and leveling up dishes purely with ingredients that I can grab from just outside my apartment. Early on, you're asked to pick a restaurant pack, which basically defines how your restaurant is going to start out. You can choose between veggie, meat, mixology, or desserts, and this just gives you a handful of extra recipes to begin with. I really like this system because it doesn't lock you into anything long term. I picked mixology initially, but pretty quickly ended up running a mostly vegan menu and selling salads because the ingredients were actually easier to gather. Running the restaurant itself is basically a full management sim layered inside the game, and honestly it's one of the strongest parts. Before opening for service, you decide what's on the menu, then you open the doors and let the customers roll in. There's a lot of strategy here though. During the prep phase you can choose menu perks. For example, customers will always order a drink with their meal, or they'll always order a starter and a main, that means you really need to plan ahead and make sure your fridge is stocked with everything you'll need before service begins. When you actually cook, each dish has its own little mini game, and how well you perform directly affects the quality of the meal. Mixing drinks, grilling meats, tossing salads, they all have mini games and they're all different from one another, and they don't feel like they get boring. Over time, you can actually hire staff to take over these mini games for you and even upgrade them with perks, which adds a whole other layer of progression. There's actually a surprising amount of depth just in the restaurant system alone, and it never felt overwhelming in my first 2 hours, just addictive. I also really want to shout out the art style and the setting because it's such a refreshing change for this genre. Instead of the usual countryside village or quiet farming town, Chef RPG takes place in an almost cyberpunk-inspired city. There are robot NPCs, neon lights everywhere, and you actually live in a small apartment rather than a farmhouse. It instantly gives the game a strong identity and visually stands out in the sea of cozy pixel art games. Even though Chef RPG is still in early access, it doesn't really feel like it. Everything I interacted with, from hunting and gathering to the cooking minigames, it all felt polished and complete. According to the Steam page, the current content covers about 1.5 in-game years, which already feels like a lot. My 2 hours absolutely flew by, and I was genuinely a little bit sad when my time with it ended. This one I can easily see myself sinking a lot more time into, and it's easily one of the more exciting cozy games I've played recently, especially for anyone who wants something familiar but with just a fresh twist. Onto a management sim now. This is Cat Cafe Manager, and there were just quite a few annoyances with this game. For example, when I was serving drinks, it shows a cooking animation where I'm frying in a frying pan every single time, which just feels a little bit repetitive. I would have loved to see a different animation for this. Another thing is when I place some food in a bowl outside to attract stray cats, the can of food just appears on top of the bowl. I also tried to put a rug underneath the cat bowls, but because it's on a diagonal angle, I just couldn't rotate it straight, so it just fell off no matter where I placed it, and it would actually end up clipping outside of the building itself. I ended up removing it entirely because of this, and also I cook pretzels at the sink, which I guess is fine, just all of these things are very rough around the edges. There was also just an absolutely diabolical bug in the first hour of me playing this game. There was a moment where it told me the customer couldn't reach their seat, and I thought maybe that the staff was in the way, so I moved the chairs, but it didn't really fix anything. And then this pop-up telling me the customer couldn't reach their seat just came faster and faster, and I realized people were stacking up outside on the side of the road. My game actually started chugging from all the customers piling up, and I think all of these customers still counted towards my daily rank and pay because my end of day summary was absolutely insane. The only way I managed to fix it was by moving the door to my cafe, which made me think that the bush and flowers outside were blocking people from getting in. After reading other Steam reviews, it seems like glitches and even crashes are just not uncommon for this game, so be aware of that. I would be easier on this game if it was still early access, but it is fully released on almost £20, and I just hate to say this, but it's not worth it. Once again, this is a game I got in the Humble Bundle group with Here Comes Niko, and if I'd paid full prices for either of these games, I would have really been upset with what I got. On the plus side, the skill tree system is really simple and satisfying. You earn a thing called Delight by serving customers, and a certain amount of Delight will unlock a new skill that you select on the tree. I went for Advanced Brews, which unlocks new recipes like lattes and root beer, as well as new ingredients like milk. You can also attract cats to your cafe by placing food outside, and once you pet them 3 times, they're officially adoptable into your cafe. Ultimately, this is a very, very loose management sim. It's perfect if you want something you can play while watching YouTube on a second monitor, because there's almost absolutely no penalty if you get distracted. At one point, I hired a server and could just completely look away whilst the cafe ran itself, and it basically became an idle sim at that point. That's great for some people, but personally, I prefer a little bit more gameplay in my cozy games. By the end of my 2 hours, I did feel the pull to level up my cats and make the cafe look a little cuter, but realistically, it wouldn't have taken me that much longer to finish, and I don't think I'll be coming back to do it. I have played this game on the Switch before, and honestly, it was perfect for just under the blanket chilling. Sitting on my PC just didn't have the same vibe this time. It's not necessarily a bad game, but the gameplay barely changes over time. You just keep doing the same things over and over. So if this sounds like your kind of relaxed cozy game, it's fine, but for the full price, I'd wait for a deep discount. If it doesn't grab you immediately, it's better to look for another cozy game with more depth. Tiny Glade is a super chill building game where you just make nice looking castles, ruins, and little villages. You just place the stuff down and let the game naturally shape it into something that looks good. However, one of the first things that I ran into with Tiny Glade is that there's no copy and paste mechanic. When I started building my first proper structure, I wanted to go for something almost Dark Souls-esque, like a big church or cathedral, because I think the game really lends itself into that kind of architecture. I built a tower on one side of the building, then immediately wanted to duplicate it onto the other side so everything was symmetrical and the same height. Turns out you just can't. There's no way to duplicate objects at all. That leads into another small frustration, which is moving large builds. I finished laying out the base of my castle, then realised I placed it slightly too far to the right of the plot. I wanted to shift the whole thing over to the centre a bit better, so naturally I tried to find a way to select the entire build and move it together. As far as I can tell, that just isn't an option. I couldn't find anything in-game or online about it either. If I wanted to move it, I'd have to move every single piece individually. The main building, the bottoms of both towers, then the tops of the towers, and try to line them all back up again so everything stayed even. It's not impossible, but it definitely makes you think twice before committing to big structures. While playing, I ended up watching a video that went through basically every interaction you can do in the game, and honestly there's so much more going on under the surface than you'd expect. The person in the video even mentioned that if you missed a lot of these mechanics they wouldn't blame you because some of the interactions are pretty obscure, and yeah, I kind of agree. A lot of the depth here isn't immediately obvious unless you experiment or actively look things up. Going into Tiny Glade, I kind of expected it to feel similar to Make Room, but it really doesn't at all, which is wild considering on paper they sound very similar. One is interior focused and the other exterior buildings, but the way you interact with them and the mindset you need to complete them are completely different. Tiny Glade feels much more like learning a language than just placing objects. And because of that, I genuinely recommend anyone jumping into this game to watch a few videos or guides on the building controls and hidden interactions like I did first. It unlocks so much of what makes this game fun. There were loads of little things that I learned that instantly made my builds look better. For example, I noticed these random orange bricks appearing where parts of my building intersected, and I really couldn't figure out why. Turns out the game was pulling the colour contextually from a roof that I'd hidden. Even though the roof wasn't visible, it was still influencing the surrounding materials. All I had to do was raise the roof, recolour it properly, then hide it again to keep the roof flat. Problem solved. Another small thing that I learned that was useful was that buildings automatically generate bushes and flowers at their base. If you don't like how cluttered it looks, you can just click and hold near the bottom of one of the buildings and make them disappear. Stuff like that isn't explained, but once you know it, it gives you way more control over how your builds actually look. With this, I want to talk about procedural generation a little bit. It's not a game where you can just place things down exactly as you want. The game works to guess on what it should spawn in based on what you are doing. For example, I can't place a door on a wall, but making a path into it will spawn a door there, and it might spawn some decorations nearby, it might not. I'm not going to pretend I know half of how this stuff works, but when I say procedural generation, I don't mean like generative AI, press a button and it creates something. This game is full of mathematical formulas coded by the devs with their own custom engine to create. It is very impressive, and I just think it's really neat figuring out how the game works to spawn things and learning to work with it. I really can't stress enough how much Tiny Glade opens up once you take a bit of time to understand how it works. It goes from feeling slightly restrictive and confusing to being this really satisfying creative tool where you can make genuinely cool stuff and feel like you're in control of the details. One last thing I absolutely loved is the little animal touches. There are animals wandering around your build, and if you place something where they're standing, they'll move out of the way. Birds fly off, and because sheep obviously can't fly, they give them little tiny umbrellas so they float down gently instead. Overall, Tiny Glade isn't perfect and it can be a little unintuitive at first, but once it clicks, it really clicks, and it's one of those games where the more effort you put into learning it, the more rewarding it becomes. By the end of my 2 hours, I was already having way more fun than at the start. One thing Graveyard Keeper does really well from the start is give you a clear goal almost immediately without boxing you in. You meet the bishop early on and he basically tells you straight, your graveyard is a mess and until you clean it up he's not promoting you to cleric. Get the graveyard to quality 5 and you're in. It's a simple objective but it doesn't feel restrictive. You're free to approach it however you want, which I really appreciated during my first couple of hours. I also absolutely love how quickly the game leans into its dark humour. Finding out from the skull that the tavern will buy your human meat is just a wild statement, but when you actually go to sell it and the bartender hits you with, does your meat have the royal stamp? Yeah, we've had some issues with unauthorized meat before, and suddenly everything clicks. You can officially get your meat authorized by mailing it off to the royal authority, which, yeah, I don't think my meat is going to be passing that inspection. Or, alternatively, I can find a guy called Snake who has a fake stamp. The game doesn't point you towards him, it doesn't give you a quest marker, but instead it lets you find him the good old-fashioned way by exploring, and I was instantly motivated to go find him myself because of his perks. The story had me hooked surprisingly fast too. People talk about time in symbols instead of days, the bartender doesn't know what a year is, and nobody questions the fact that we've just appeared out of nowhere. There's this constant underlying mystery of where you are and how you got here and why everyone is so chill about it, and that alone made me want to keep playing. So you remember earlier when I said a game on this list has a really unique sleeping mechanic? This is the game. Unlike a lot of farming sims, there's no forced bedtime. You can stay awake as long as you want, for days even if you wanted. The only thing that is stopping you is your stamina. When you do go to sleep, you get to choose how long for. If you just want to top up a little bit of energy, you can sleep briefly and wake up early, but if you want a full refill, you can do that too. This in turn gives you complete control over the pacing of your days. At one point I got ambushed by bats whilst looking for iron, and I thought, oh no, I'm about to pass out. But instead, the game just told me I didn't have enough energy to attack. There's no punishment for running out of stamina. I could still walk around the town, talk to people, buy things. I just couldn't do stamina-based actions until I slept and regain that energy. Personally, I love this as it takes so much pressure off compared to traditional cozy games where passing out and managing time can feel stressful. The days will continue to pass regardless of if you sleep or not, so you can work really early into the hours of the morning. It's just stamina based and you save when you sleep as well. The game's also really intuitive without being handholdy. I didn't need a pop-up tutorial to tell me logs go in the log holder, it just made sense. When I needed nails to craft a wooden repair kit, I would hover over them and see where they're made. The game tells you exactly what you need, but not always how to get there, and I think that's kind of where it shines. I knew nails existed, but I couldn't craft them yet, so that led me to the technologies tab where I realised I needed red orbs to unlock the recipe for it first. It's a constant loop of, okay, I need this, so how do I get that, without the game stopping every 5 seconds to explain it. Even small things are just really well thought out. The first time a new body arrives for you to deal with, the game doesn't interrupt you and tell you, instead you just hear a little jingle and see an icon appear. You know exactly what that means, and you can deal with it when you're ready, and it just respects your player agency in a way where I could continue what I was doing and get around to the body later. Even learning new stations feels natural. When I first tried to smelt iron, it didn't work because I hadn't fueled the furnace. A quick look around the interface and I figured it out myself. That moment felt way more rewarding than first opening the furnace up and a big pop-up of text appears explaining it. That said, I can definitely see some people finding the game too grindy. There are a lot of steps to do basically anything. For example, to repair a grave, I need a wooden repair kit. To make that, I need a carpenter's workbench. For that, I need flitch and iron parts. For flitch, I need a sawhorse. For iron parts, I need an anvil. For iron ingots, I need a furnace. For the furnace, I need fuel. For fuel, I need firewood. For firewood, I need billets. For billets, I need logs. You get the idea. It's 10 steps to do one thing. But honestly, that's kind of why I personally find this game cozy. Bear with me on this one. Think Animal Crossing. You gather resources to craft tools when they break. I'm talking about New Horizons here, by the way. You fish to fill out a museum, not because a quest tells you to do so. You collect stone and clay, different types of wood to build bridges and decorations for your home. And although the character interactions aren't insanely complex, nor is there really much of a story, I and millions of other people love that gameplay loop that might be a bit boring or grindy or chory for other people. That feeling that I just described, Graveyard Keeper scratches that itch for me too in the absolute best way possible. By the end of my playtime, I just opened the church and learned about sermons. Performing weekly sermons earns you faith, which acts as a currency for some really important things. For example, when I tried talking to Snake, he did not believe I was the Graveyard Keeper and threatened me with a knife. Fair enough. Now I need 5 faith to convince him otherwise, so that's officially my next goal. I want to access that fake stamp from him so I can buy my shady meat business. Overall, Graveyard Keeper ended up being one of my favourite games on this list. I'm absolutely classing it as a cozy game, not because it switches your brain off, but because it scratches that satisfying do the chores, optimise the routine, get into the flow itch that a lot of cozy gamers love. By the time my 2 hours were up, I didn't want to stop playing, and honestly, once this video is out, I am back on it instantly. As of writing, Moonstone Island is still receiving frequent updates and bug fixes, which is always really nice to see with an indie game. It gives a lot more confidence that the devs are actively supporting it and improving things over time rather than just leaving it as it is. I will say this though, the game started off as a bit slow for me. I don't expect every game to have some super cool or innovative tutorial, but Moonstone Island very much falls into the do this thing, now do this thing category. Your dad constantly stops you to explain the next step and you're not allowed to move on until you've done exactly what he's asked. It's very, for a lack of a better word, tutorial-y. If you're someone who didn't like how I described Graveyard Keeper and how it just kind of throws you in and lets you figure things out yourself, then this approach might actually appeal more to you. That said, I will give it credit, this tutorial phase only lasts around the first 20 minutes, and once the tutorial's over, the game really does let you loose and allows you to figure things out on your own. Now, I'm not going to mention any specific Nintendo games here, but my father gives me a choice of 3 monsters to start with, and I pick the sheep. Then I'm thrown into a tutorial battle which introduces the combat system, essentially a turn-based card game. This is where I test my sheep against a gremlin, and honestly, the music during the battles absolutely slaps. It fits the vibe of the game perfectly, and is very similar to a certain Nintendo game it takes inspiration from. Combat has a few nice mechanics that keep it from feeling too basic. Whoever has the highest speed stat goes first, and enemies also have something called armor. Once you knock it down to 0, they become dizzy and lose a turn. You can break that armor by either using cards specifically designed for it, or by attacking them with elements that the enemy is weak to. This just adds a bit more strategy to fights. Sometimes it's better to focus on their armor instead of just dealing raw damage straight away. After battles, your monsters earn XP and level up, which gives them bonuses. For example, my sheep gained passive bonus that gives 10 plus XP when using the Basham card. You can also get to choose a stat to upgrade, and I went with health, and you can also add a new card to their deck. I chose Bite, which deals 1 damage twice. You can also heal your monsters by feeding them. I'll be honest, I went into this game not really knowing if I would enjoy it. I don't think the game is my type of game I would actively seek out if I wasn't making this video, but once the tutorial ended and the game stopped holding my hand, I actually started to have a really good time. I personally don't love being constantly pulled out of gameplay to have information dumped on me, so when Moonstone Island finally let me roam free, it really clicked. I got genuinely excited when I discovered there was a friendship system. I loved just wandering around the town, meeting the villagers and exploring at my own pace. The friendship system is also really nice. You can talk to a character 3 times and the game tells you your success rate with each time you speak to them. I eventually cleared out a small area, placed my camp and started farming. I did get a little annoyed with my monster constantly following me around and standing in my way, but after poking around in the settings, I found you can actually disable that entirely, which is a really appreciated quality of life option. While doing a quest to collect stone for one of the locals, digging it up opened a hole in the ground that led to a cave. Down there I found resources like copper ore, which I'm assuming will be used for tool upgrades or crafting later on, as well as enemies to fight, which help the world feel a little bit more rewarding to explore. Overall, Moonstone Island feels a little bit like a Marmite game for me. I'm fairly confident that if you're not enjoying it within the first 2 hours, this probably isn't going to suddenly click later on for you, but if you are enjoying yourself an hour or 2 in, it feels like it's the kind of game you could sink a lot of time into. Once it gets past its slow, tutorial-heavy start, it opens up into something genuinely fun, especially if you enjoy cozy games with exploration, creature collecting, and a bit of strategy mixed in too. That's it for this video. There were some games on this list that were exactly what I expected, and some that totally took me by surprise. I hope this gave you a good idea of what to dive into next if you're looking for something relaxing to play. If you enjoyed tagging along, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. It really helps me keep making videos like this one. And I would also love to hear from you. Are there any games on this list you've played before? Any you haven't played but are excited to check out? Let me know down below. I'd love to chat with you all about it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.